Welcome back to another episode of the Know Your Power podcast. I'm your host, Juliarene.
And Kendall Graboff.
And today, guys, we have Caitlin, who is the CEO of Strive to Thrive coaching business. She's also the host of STT podcast, and her mission is to help women thrive in all aspects of their life. Welcome to the show, Caitlin.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.
I'm super excited.
I know.
That was a great intro, by the way.
Yeah.
For those of you listening that listened to Sarah's episode, which would have came out 3 weeks ago now. This is the Caitlin that we repeatedly addressed and talked about during that episode. So if you're coming from that one, this is her.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Well, I still need to listen to that episode. So
Yes.
now I'm like extra excited to know what was said about it.
Very good things, which is why I'm so excited that you're here today.
I'd be way too nosy to be like, oh.
Right. Now that I know it's
To be a fly on the wall.
I'm like, I know what I'm listening to on my car ride home.
Talking about me? Okay. Well, you guys work together, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And Sarah told us that she's getting ready to move.
Yeah, I can't think about it.
Oh, you're right. We shouldn't even.
Yeah. It is weird because it's March 1st now. So technically this is like the moving month. And I was just with Sarah yesterday and I was like, I think I'm still like in the denial phase.
Yeah.
Like all your friends back where you're, moving to are like super excited. They're like, yay, Sarah's moving back. And I'm just like, no, she's not.
You're like, shut up. She's my friend.
You just have to have mandatory in-person meetings like once a month.
Right.
Be like, you have to come to Texas.
Exactly. I'm like, as long as we have like dates on the calendar, fine. But I'm still, I'm in support, but I'm just selfishly, I'm upset.
I support you, but also no.
But
I
also,
don't.
like, can we maybe like renegotiate like what's going on?
This wasn't in our friendship contract when
right.
I signed up for this shit.
Nope.
Aww.
But no, I'm really happy for her because it's like, when you're supporting one of your best friends doing something that is best for them and they know is best for them, that it's kind of like you have to just put your opinions on the back burner and just be like, listen, I'm just so happy to know that you're doing what's best for you. We're still gonna be best friends. Like everything's gonna be the same. I'm just gonna miss you.
Yeah.
So
Everything's gonna be the same, but I'm just gonna miss you. Yeah.
Cues tears.
Cues tears. Aww.
Sarah, I love you.
I know. We love you, Sarah. But let's get into your story and how you got into fitness.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of different journeys that kind of like led me here, but I know that Sarah, you guys probably talked about this with her. She did come from an athletic background. I came from zero athletic background. So never played sports. I did like dance and gymnastics like when I was very young, but outside of that, like I never knew what it was like to be on like a team or like train for like any sort of like athletic purpose. Like I just was very much like, when I stopped dancing and I went into high school, I didn't really have like a hobby. I didn't really have a sport or like anything that kept me in, I don't know, like in line with things that were outside of just like what my friends were doing. Cause everyone else kind of had like something going on, but I was very much just like, I don't want to say a loner, but just like kind of lost in terms of what was mine. Like I didn't feel like I had something that like lit me up when I was that young. And so when I had graduated high school, I kind of just took the route where I was like, I'm going to go to a state school so I can commute and just kind of like figure out what I want to do and also like figure out, what I really enjoy. Cause all I really identified with, was just my friends in high school. So when I had started college, I was kind of just, again, working multiple jobs, doing the whole, like, let's commute, let's save money. And one of my friends at the time, she had kind of started to struggle with an eating disorder. I didn't know at that time that it was an eating disorder. I just was kind of like, I'm not going to say any names, but so-and-so is losing a lot of weight. Like she looks really great. And like, I didn't have a lot of weight to lose. Right. So like my perception of what she was doing was just like, oh, she's just getting fit. And so I started realizing that a lot of like what she was doing, I'd kind of start picking up on those kind of habits as well. I think I was like probably 18, 19 at this time. For reference, I'll be 29 in August. So this is like a long time ago. But because I didn't know really what it meant to be healthy and fit, I just was like, well, if I want to, look like her, like look a little bit smaller, let me just start doing what she was doing. And so this turned into, and I don't want to say that she's the source of the eating disorder, but it was, starting to see stuff on social media and just kind of picking up on like, again, Pinterest at that time, 10 years ago, there was some up shit on Pinterest, like things that were like, it was just all about abs and having like a thigh gap and being like really tiny. And Instagram was very new at that point in time too. I didn't have an Instagram in high school or, college really. I think it was just more so like, oh, this is like a new app that's kind of come out. And people started posting like their bodies and you'd see like models and stuff. So this kind of like led me to just start, taking a very restrictive approach with health and fitness. Typical going to the gym, just starting to do cardio for like hours and hours and hours, eating like the bare minimum. So this kind of turned into an eating disorder where I struggled with it for probably like 2 years. For reference, my lowest weight during that time was like 98 pounds and I'm 5'5", and like as a healthy female, I kind of now average like between 135 to 140. Yeah. So 40 pounds off of a typical healthy woman, like that's a lot of weight. Yeah. So I was like extremely underweight, and this was like all during like a wintertime season was like the peak of my eating disorder where I really started to like lose the most weight. And I had still lived at home at this time because I was commuting to college, but because I was wearing like a lot of big baggy clothes, no one really saw my body. So no one really saw what I was doing. My parents didn't really know what I was doing. My brother was away at school. Like I didn't really have a lot of friends at that time. So no one was really like seeing me without like clothes on or like in a bathing suit or anything. So the first time that, my parents had really seen what I started to like look like was I think in like June of 2015 when we were going to my brother's high school graduation. And it was like my first time like wearing a dress, and like you could see like my arms, I was tiny. And my parents knew that like what I was doing, like they started picking up on like certain habits. Like, they'd be like, hey, we made dinner. Do you want anything? I'd be like, oh, I already ate at like so-and-so's house, or I got something on my way home from school, whatever excuses. And so that day at my brother's graduation, one of his friends' parents had come up to my parents and they were like, is Caitlin okay? Wow. And they were like, well, what do you mean? They were like, she looks really sick. And they were like, and then that's the point where they were like, oh my God, like you're right. Like they hadn't realized the extent of like what it was all coming to until they started kind of like assessing. And I'll never forget, like they sat me down like that night after my brother's graduation, like my brother was there with them, and they were like, we're really worried about you. Like, what have you been doing to yourself? Like this, like we're just seeing like these really unhealthy patterns. Like people are starting to show concerns. Like, you can like talk to us if you need anything. And I think like at that point, I knew what I was doing was really unhealthy, but I think for me to hear it from my parents and also hear that other people were visually seeing that I was doing something extremely unhealthy to myself, that's when I was like, oh shit, like I need to stop. Cause I also knew like what was like the purpose of what I was doing. I tried to start thinking about like, where am I taking, like, how small am I trying to get? Like, what am I trying to achieve through doing this? Because I felt awful. I wasn't gaining any strength or anything. Like, I just was basically scraping by day to day to achieve like this very tiny, frail body that wasn't even allowing me to feel good. So I know a lot of people's stories with eating disorders are very different. I never want to be the person to say, well, I never had to go to treatment, but I never went to treatment. I literally cold turkey was like, I am done with this. And from that day forward, I just very slowly like started eating a little bit more and started trying to educate myself a little bit more on what I really needed to like have a healthy body without restriction. So I never want to take away from someone else's journey that did really struggle, have to, seek professional help. And now looking back almost 10 years later, I'm like, damn, like I should have probably talked to someone for sure. So I always encourage women, like, if you are someone who is struggling with an eating disorder, or you're feeling like you're sinking into these really toxic, unhealthy patterns, like talk to someone. Cause I wish that I had done that sooner, and it would have saved me a lot of time. It would have saved a lot of worry and arguing and just, my parents' concerns, all the things. But yeah, I literally like pulled myself out of my eating disorder completely on my own, which is like, I look back and I'm like, how the fuck did you do that? But that's what kind of like catapulted my interest into health and fitness, and really, understanding what you truly need to do to create a life of freedom through health and fitness, to where you can feel your best, look your best, live your life, and not have to feel like you're putting yourself in this box of just like, you're not allowed to do this. You can only do this. And at that time I had changed my major in school. What's really funny is I was in school for business, and I was like, oh, fuck business. I like, what am I ever going to do with that? Like,
now you have
like,
a business.
And they're like, teaching about all the Excel spreadsheets. Business was just very differently mainly taught at that point in time in school. I mean, I'm sure, you know, maybe they've changed the way they teach things, but changed my major from business to exercise science because I was like, clearly I'm really passionate about this. And then what's so funny is I ended up putting the two of them together. Yeah. None of what I learned in school about business has been really applied to what I do now, but it is just funny how it kind of was like a foreshadowing in a way. So yeah, that's kind of like, long story short, kind of the transition of what I, you know, directed me into this. That's amazing. Wow. The fact that during that point, and it's kind of similar. I mean, when we were talking to your good friend, Sarah, hers is so similar. So I can see why you guys would be so close because you really can relate to where her parents also kind of sat her down and were like, yo, hey. And that's a really big moment too, because just like what you said is that you knew deep down that there was something that was wrong. Yeah. Like something was tugging at your intuition and saying like, okay, I don't really know why I'm doing this. I don't know what goal we're going for. And I know that I don't feel great. Yeah. But when your parents sat you down and kind of like confirmed what you were already thinking, it's really like, oh, okay, I'm not only thinking this, but other people are. Right. So I'm kind of curious to, what was your mindset behind eating and working out in general then versus where it is now? Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's so interesting to think about. Cause I think back then it was very much like, how can I be the smallest? Yeah. And it was like, you know, any means necessary. Right. And you'd go into like a store and buy clothing and I'd be like, I need to fit into the smallest size. Yeah. Like if they had a 0-0, got to fit in the 0-0. If I couldn't fit in the 0-0, well, fuck, I'm doing something wrong. Yeah. And that was like a crazy mentality. Cause like, who was I even comparing that to? Like, why did I think that I had to be a 0-0? And it's just like everything you like absorb. I feel like if you're someone who doesn't have good people or mentors or, you know, people you can look up to, or you're not following the right people online, like it can be really unsafe for a young adult. And I feel like that's kind of what, not only like seeing one of my friends kind of patterns with her eating disorder, but then obviously social media and just this perception that I had to be so tiny. I think I was just working out and, you know, being so excessive with food and restriction because I just was like, well, tiny is the best way to be. Now it's so interesting because I obviously will always have, you know, physique goals and want to feel confident and strong. But now I feel like my approach to health and fitness is very much just part of my life and not my whole life. Where back then everything revolved around like, oh my gosh, you can't have this. Oh my gosh, you can only have this. Oh, we got to go do your cardio. Like everything was just like fitness and skinny and tiny. Whereas now it's like, I work out to take care of myself, and showing up for myself is what allows me to show up better for my partner and my relationships and my family and feel energetic and have healthy, thriving hormones. Like there's just so much more to health and fitness than just being a size, which I think I just more so identified as a size when I was younger. Whereas now I'm like, how can I just go out and live my life and have yummy dinners and travel and, you know, do all the things that you're supposed to do as a human. I wasn't being a human back then. I was just being like a robot. Like I just was like, eat from very little and go do cardio and just shrink yourself. And now I'm like, no, that's just not like realistic at all. So really, I think my turning point was just understanding that health and fitness is something that should always add to your life and never take away from it. Yeah. I'm sure that transition took a long time to settle into. What was I know it's one thing to recover from eating disorder, you're healing the nutritional side. What brought you from cardio to like, hey, I want to try weight training or I want to get into this? Yeah. So my fiance, Chad, who I've known for like literally 11 years, we had kind of reconnected as I was coming out of like my recovery process. So he comes from a very athletic background. He played lacrosse for like almost 15 years, you know, always went to the gym. And so when I started kind of like finding interest in like, how can I get stronger and start actually building muscle? Because clearly I wasn't building any muscle before, eating nothing. He was doing CrossFit at the time. So very intimidating. But my first experiences with weight training was actually doing like Olympic lifting and CrossFit, which just like the most intense form of weight training. From 0 to 100. I just was like, hours of cardio to like, oh my God, let me pick up this barbell. But he took me to like my first ever CrossFit class. mind you, I was probably like 25 pounds lighter than I am today. I was just like still kind of very tiny. I'd never had like weight trained in my life. So I walk into this gym, I see all these freaking jacked women, and I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, I gotta put some weight on this bar. So it was like immediately a very inspiring and a very different environment to be in, because I went from being like needing to be so tiny to be seeing these strong women and being like, holy shit, like how are they lifting that much? Like immediately just seeing women that had like 2 plates on a barbell, like deadlifting. Meanwhile, I had never been under a barbell or lifted a barbell in my life. So I think a lot of what I can to Chad at that point was just having someone who could kind of almost show me the ropes, and like it wasn't as scary because I wasn't really doing it by myself. I kind of had him as like my guiding light to like, hey, get into the gym. Like it's a judgment-free zone. Like, just try it out, see if you like it. And then I had ended up doing CrossFit for like 2 years, and I honestly got so strong because I went from doing nothing to, having all the newbie gains and starting to like actually eat more. So CrossFit was a really fun time because I feel like it gave me also a sense of like community really early, where I know a lot of people struggle to like feel like they have that sense of community, and then they end up having like maybe a sour taste for the gym because they're like, oh, like it's scary, it's intimidating. And while it can be, I think because I went into a more of a community vibe from the very beginning, I was just like, wow, everyone's like cheering for me. Like I'd go for like a PR and everyone's like, yeah, you got this. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh my God, like you just feel so supported. So I think because I had a really great experience with that, it kind of made it a little less intimidating to get into more of just like the weight training in different types of gyms as well.
Mm-hmm. It also seems like too, like that was one of the first points where you started transitioning from fitness is about being small and is about being skinny to fitness can also be about being really strong, and it doesn't matter what your body composition looks like.
Totally.
So that's super incredible because I know that you teach that a lot to your clients, and we'll kind of like get into that a little bit later. But I'm also curious, like when you were doing CrossFit, like I am always like kind of terrified about doing CrossFit. Was there any point of view that like your body started like aching and really, really hurting? Because I know a lot of people experience that when they get into CrossFit because it is so intense.
Yeah.
It's mostly full body too.
Yeah. Like a lot of the classes are definitely more like full body based. And then I would follow programming that was very much based around like increasing strength. So like you would train with like very specific like percentages, like maybe 1 week you'd go in and train at like 70% of your 1 rep max, or you'd go in and 1 week you're training at like 90% of your 1 rep max, and you're just like, holy shit, like it's intense. But I feel like with the approach, like early on, I was like, yeah, I'm super sore, but then I was like, I need to do something better with my recovery. Like, there was like little things that I'd be like, maybe I should try this instead, or maybe I need to be sleeping more. Maybe I need to increase my calories again. But yeah, it's very taxing, I would say. So I did transition out of, I don't do CrossFit anymore. I have nothing against it. It just, because it was super taxing and very heavily involved with like, my CNS was just always like, I am not okay.
Yeah, I feel
deceased.
that.
Yeah, but the weight training itself is really what I enjoyed. With CrossFit, I didn't very much enjoy the more cardio based. There's a lot of gymnastics style stuff in CrossFit too. So I always, in any WOD, I was like, yes, I want to do the deadlifts. But then I would see like a muscle up or a rope something, and I was like, oh fuck, I don't want to do that.
Yeah,
I like to stand still and do my weights. That's usually what I tell people when they're like, what do you do? Or like, do you want to go and like go for a run, or do you want to go for a bike? I'm like, I'm a stand still worker outer.
I am a stationary person.
They're like, I pick things up, I put things down. That is us.
That is me. That is my choice, and I'm maybe in the future we'll transition. But
right.
I really wanted to read a post that I found from your Instagram, and I think it really just kind of encompasses like your transition into where you were to where you are now. So in it, you said, I built a body I love. I'm strong. I'm confident. I live very flexible lifestyle. I eat foods I love, but I'm not perfect. And I never will be, because placing the expectation of perfection causes us to miss out on a lot of the amazing things that life has to offer. Our approach to health and fitness doesn't always have to be perfect optimally, air quotes. Perfection doesn't equal healthy. Ask yourself, have I been holding myself back from seeing success on this journey because I'm trying to be perfect? And like for me, like that hit home because I try to do that with a lot of aspects of my life, not just fitness. Like I tried to do them so perfectly that it really does take away from actually enjoying it. And I feel like that was a part of what was happening to you when you weighed like 98 pounds, is you were trying to do everything like so perfect, and it had to look like a certain way so that you had to look a certain way. And it took away from you loving fitness like you do now. Like it's just kind of like a part of your life. So I kind of want you to speak to that perfection aspect of it, because I know there's listeners out there that either are starting or are already started, and they're like, I'm focusing too much on the wrong thing.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember, like, the people you follow online aren't perfect with most things that they do. And I think it's important to remember too, like, I've been on this journey now for almost 8 years, like consistently actually taking care of myself. And I don't think there's ever been a time where I've like, and this is, I've never been like an actual professional bodybuilder or anything like that. So there's never been a time where I've actually probably zeroed out, totaled out macros for the day, perfect steps, perfect cardio, perfect training session, perfect this, perfect that. And I still have a body that I love. I'm still strong. I feel good. I get a period every month. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many other things that I value outside of just the perfection component. So I feel like if you are someone who's new and maybe you follow me or any of us, like, understand that when you look at us, we've all not been perfect at something in our lives. And perfection isn't what allowed me to be successful on my journey. Consistency is, showing up for myself, the routines that I've created for myself. Like, that's what's really yielded my success, not the perfect macros, not the perfect training plan. Like, there's probably been so many weeks during my fitness journey where, I've not gone to a workout a couple times here and there, or I just wasn't feeling it and I couldn't hit a PR that week, right? Like, nothing's ever going to be perfect. So I feel like if we can just get rid of the expectation of perfection and understand that as long as you're giving your 100%, no matter what that looks like, day to day or week to week, month to month, that's what's really gonna, propel you forward, not the perfect set of macros or the perfect this or that. Like, those are all great for adherence purposes or just having something to follow. But at the end of the day, like, when I'm 50 years old, I'm not going to be worried about if my protein counts are optimal. Or,
right.
Amen.
I'm gonna like still do the things that I've been doing since I've started when I was 20, but I'm not going to probably track my macros when I'm 60 or like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm going to just focus on the fundamentals of what I've learned and take that knowledge with me for the long term.
I think it's about building habits instead of being like so strict on those habits where if they aren't 100%, you beat yourself up. I feel like that's where people kind of go wrong, is they're like, okay, I have these macro targets. If I'm off by 5 grams, my day is ruined. Like, it's like, it's not that deep.
Your body doesn't have like a built-in calculator.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's not like, oh, you're off 3 grams. No, it's like, I just feel like we put so much pressure on ourselves to be like, gotta be on point all the time. And it's like, I also took 2 years off from tracking macros, and guess what happened? Literally, my body has felt and looked the best it's ever looked. And
Me too. Yeah.
I literally, like, I'm just now starting to track a little bit again because I have my wedding in July. So I'm like trying to do a little wedding cut. But even that, I'm like, I took so much time away from tracking macros that it's like, oh, cool, I get to track macros again. But it's like, you get to choose when you want to tap back into a more, what's the word I'm looking for? Like just have a little bit more structure. Yeah. But I also identify as someone who understands that you can be intuitive if you've given yourself that baseline knowledge and that time to really understand like what your body needs.
Was it hard for you to transition from being so into what at the time was your eating disorder and like counting everything and being so strict to then now like this super free mentality? Like, how was that for you? Did you have that like light bulb, I'm immediately going to switch, or was it gradual?
Yeah, I feel like post eating disorder, I probably still tracked my macros for like probably like 4 years, honestly. But it was more about like, oh yes, I got to eat so much. I went through so many different phases with my macros. There was like, a point where I was like really growing and I was eating like 400 grams of carbs. I was just like savage, just eating everything. So I felt like macros for me weren't like, I wasn't using them to be restrictive still. I was just like, oh, it's like a tool to make sure I'm actually eating enough.
That's a good way to view it too.
Yeah, because I feel like also as women, sometimes, especially as what we see, in the community, like a lot of women do undereat. And so I felt like for me, because I had such a restrictive background in the past, I was like, well, now I get to like really eat a lot. So I want to make sure I'm actually giving myself enough. But I would say the transition, I think I just slowly, I mean, I had been intuitive for like 2 years prior to this year. And before that first year, I just was like, you know what? I've been tracking macros for so long. I know what I need. You know, I'm just going to like kind of stop. And I honestly didn't transition myself out of it at all. I just was like, I'm just going to eat today. I didn't put anything in my fitness pal. And then I literally didn't for like 2 years. So
like, oh, this is cool.
Yeah.
I can do that.
like, wow, it's just crazy what, like, you know, actually taking the time to learn something, get really good at it, and then trust yourself enough to like not have to depend on the numbers. You're like smarter than I thought.
That's kind of the phase I'm in right now where like I've done so many shows. I know how to track food. I know what most nutrition labels say before even reading them.
Yeah.
I don't track anything right now. I don't look at labels right now. I'm just intuitively eating, but it's like 90% of my diet is still that like turkey, rice, veggies, like what I like to eat. And then like I'll sometimes have a cheat meal on like a random Tuesday afternoon. Like I'm not so structured about like refeeds on Friday nights and it has to be this amount of calories. Like it's so nice being flexible. And I feel like our bodies, especially our hormones, really appreciate when we give them a little more food.
Totally. I'm just also a huge foodie. My fiance and I live downtown. And so we have a lot of food at our disposal. Yeah. And so we definitely like tap into the food scene. And so I'm also someone who's like, I can be a foodie and eat things that I love and still show up for myself and make sure that I'm on track for the most part. Because I also don't eat out every single day. Yeah. But if we're going to go out to a fun dinner, like I'm not going to just get a salad and chicken.
Yeah.
Plus we live in Austin, Texas. The food here is really freaking good.
It's pretty bomb.
I'm sorry, but I'm not willing to give that up.
Yeah. You're like, I could have had that at home.
Yeah.
That's my thought when like I'm going out to eat. I'm like, could I have had this at home?
Right.
Then no. That's why like I weirdly have beef with like Chipotle because that's like, okay, Chipotle is good and it's healthy. Like it's it's a convenient. Everybody who's in the fitness industry is like, let's go to Chipotle.
We all go through a Chipotle phase.
Yeah, we do. But then to me, I'm also like, literally, I could have made this at home. Yes. And then I'm like, fuck, I'm spending money on stuff I could have made at home. And then that's a whole
And you could probably get like 3 or 4 meals out of the
no,
food
exactly.
you actually make at home.
Exactly. The one thing that I wanted to talk about, and I'm trying to remember, I wish I had a pen because every time people say stuff, I'm like,
we should start doing that. Give you like a little notepad.
I know, and it'd be like a random only thing that I would be able to understand if I read it, or if I wrote it. But it was if I ribbit it. Anyways, today's the day. It's a day. You were talking about it was on the aspect of macros. Okay, so you were saying that you transitioned from being super restrictive and then you started tracking macros, and it actually helped you make sure that you were getting enough food in. So one thing that I also noticed is that macros can be super good because it's called if it fits your macros. It's like flexible dieting. Right. But what I've seen sometimes is that at a certain point, it actually becomes super restrictive. Yeah. Where like you feel like you have to hit this number or you're
like a failure that day.
Oh yeah. Or like it's at the end of the night and you're like eating a bunch of food to try and hit your macros when it's like you're not really hungry. Yes. So then we turn it into something that it's not. Like humans tend to do this with things. We just ruin everything.
100%. So we ruin a good thing.
Yeah.
We had a good thing going and we just fuck it up.
Do you feel like that is something that's true, or you've seen that maybe with your clients or yourself?
Yes. It's funny. I feel like I was talking to someone about this the other day, but I was talking about how when I was going through like a growing phase, right? You're just like force feeding yourself food. And I'm sure you can relate to this because you are a bodybuilder. So it's like you kind of have to go through different stages of growing and cutting and maintaining and growing and cutting. So you understand this, but as someone who's not a professional bodybuilder, I also recognize that I can still change my body composition without having to go from one extreme to the next. I have absolutely zero interest in eating 400 grams of carbs a day. I genuinely don't. That phase for me, when I was going through like a pretty intense bulking phase, I think I was just doing it because I was like, oh, this is what I need to do to grow. And while that's true in some capacity, yes, you do need to fuel your body at a higher caliber to grow and change. But I also recognize that I just don't have any interest in like force feeding myself when I'm just genuinely not hungry. Because what I think that does is I think that starts to allow someone to feel like they can't trust themselves. They can't trust their instinct. They can't trust their intuitiveness as eaters to be like, I'm full, but then we tell ourselves, but you got to keep eating.
It's a really interesting viewpoint on that.
That's
you know what
true.
I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think that for me, I've gotten my body to a place where I genuinely feel like I'm really strong. I feel like I've taken a lot of time to grow and build muscle, but I also feel like I'm at a place where I'm like, I don't have any interest in forcing myself to have to like go to an uncomfortable extreme with food to continue changing my body. Cause I can still do that without having to like eat 3,000 calories a day, because that's just not what makes me feel good. It fucks my digestion up. I just feel really lethargic. And so I'm like, I want to feel like light and energetic and like just flowing through the day without being like, God, I'm fucking bloated and my stomach hurts. Like
crap, I need to eat again.
I remember my last real bulk, and you just like don't feel good. You're like, all your clothes fit kind of weird, and you're just like, damn, like, is it worth the uncomfortableness? Which like for bodybuilding, it is to a degree, but like you said, if you're just patient and take more time, you can still put on muscle. Totally. You don't have to do it overnight.
And I'm sure like for you guys, like, you probably have been through seasons maybe where you've been like, oh, like maybe I was eating too much during this season. Like maybe like it's like something you can take with you for your next phase where you're
definitely,
like, now I kind of know like baseline what I need, that I can still grow, but I don't need to like shove food down my throat. And like, you know what I mean? I feel like it just teaches you a lot about like the extremes to both sides, whether you're under eating or like really overeating.
Absolutely.
Definitely. And what's crazy is I feel like there was a time, and it's still, I think we're kind of moving out of it, where
I hope
everyone's moved out of a lot of phases in the fitness space.
Hopefully, is that the only way to build muscle was to do a bulk, when really like you can build muscle in your maintenance.
Totally.
And you can still keep a healthy body composition, and you can stay really strong. And that's basically like what I'm doing now. My maintenance calories is about 2,300. So, you know, I don't really have to go that much higher than that in order to build muscle. But if I do start like getting hungrier, then maybe I need to fuel myself with more food. But there's also no guarantee that the carbs that we are eating in our bulk are going to lead to muscle.
Totally true.
Totally. Very true.
Yes.
And I feel like we always think that like, okay, if I eat these carbs, it's going to have this muscle on my leg. Like it's equivalent.
I wish.
Yeah, there's a lot of extremes, I feel like, in the fitness space. There's a lot of ebbs and flows. And I feel like as someone now who's been in this space for a long time, I've seen so many transitions where I feel like now we're definitely in more of a phase as like a fitness space where things are a little bit more lax, a little bit more like intuitive, which is great. And I can obviously attest to that as someone who was intuitive for a long time. I also think there's a fine line between being a little bit too lax and not having any structure and just being intuitive with every single thing you do. Because if you are someone who genuinely really wants to change your body, that's going to still take a lot of hard work. And I feel like, you know, something that I like to always remind people is like, yes, the place that I've gotten to myself now, I can be a little bit more intuitive because there were years and years and years of very strategic, like everything I was doing with progressive overload and my food and all the things. So yeah, if you are someone who wants to change your body, that might still take a little bit more than maybe what you're giving from an intuitive perspective, right? You still might need to learn a little bit more. That's why I always say like learn the fundamentals before you just take a more intuitive approach. Because if you don't know anything about macros and you're trying to be intuitive, it's going to be really hard to be intuitive when you don't even know what protein does for your body or what protein is, right? Like you look at certain foods and when you're, you know, newer to fitness, you're just like, I didn't know cereal was a carb, right? But but now because you've educated yourself, you can be more intuitive because you're like, you know the difference between the things.
So like, I now know that peanut butter isn't a good source of protein. It's actually a lot of fat. You know?
I'm like, maybe 4 grams of protein and like 20 fat. I'm like, see, that's why it's really powerful to have the education of macros first, then dive into the intuitive approach, because you're just like, you can build your plates around the knowledge that you've, you know, taken the time to really
Did you ever have a nutrition or health coach in general when you were transitioning or at any point in your fitness journey, or were you fully self-educating?
So between like what I was learning in school and then also I did hire a coach who now is one of my very best friends, Nick, he's one of my best friends, but he was one of my first health and fitness coaches when I was starting to get more into the like, let's grow and bulk. And like, I just felt like I needed someone to help me do that a little bit more strategically because I had never done it myself. So while I had the education from school in terms of like a health and fitness perspective and exercise science, I still felt like they don't teach you that stuff in school. They're not like, this is how you do a bulk, or like, you know, they kind of do, but not to like, they're not working with you one-on-one. So I also think that having someone who can really structure things out for you, give you the guidelines, be that support system for you when you do have questions is really powerful. Obviously, as coaches, you guys know that.
Coaches need coaches.
Yeah, but I'm a firm believer that if you don't know something, there's no harm in asking. It's not something to be embarrassed about to ask for support or help. And I feel like so many of us have this ego of like, I'll just figure it out. And like, that's how I grew up. Like I would always just see like parents or like friends, I'll just figure it out. Me. And I'm like, yeah, you can, but what if someone could teach you how to do it better
and quicker,
or get you there faster? Right? I'm like, you know, if I tried to do my first bulk by myself, who's to say that would have taken me like much longer, or maybe a lot of like unneeded things that I was trying to implement that I didn't need to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think mentorship and support is huge for anyone's success, really.
Yeah. Kind of going into that whole world then for you, is that what made you want to help other people? Like you've built this whole empire of like you, and you have multiple coaches under you, and it's all successful and empowering. And we talked to Sarah a little bit about like how everyone kind of has their strong suit on your team. And it just seems like super badass to have like a little women's group that's like empowering other women. What got you there? What made you want to do that?
Yeah. So when I started my Instagram, back when Instagram was very new and I started seeing health and fitness posts, I was like, I feel like I have a lot of knowledge and insight to give. Why not just start posting? And I remember when I made my health and fitness or my fitness account, Caitlin Michelle Fit, I had it as a different name because I was scared that people from high school would find it. And oh my gosh, what if so-and-so sees my workouts? It's so embarrassing. And I was so afraid of what people would think about me, like documenting my own journey, that I was like hiding it. And then I was like, you know what? Like, why am I like embarrassed about this? Like, this is a good thing. Like, I am doing a good thing by providing insight and information, and I'm sharing my journey. And I feel like the way that Instagram has shifted, like I was actually talking to Sarah about this morning. My Instagram used to almost just be like my diary.
Yeah.
So it was like me, and I'd be like, hey guys, like woke up today, like made my oatmeal, and now I'm going to, and it was just literally like me documenting what I was doing. But I was like, I felt like that was helping someone because when I was new to health and fitness, I wasn't following the right accounts and I had no idea what I was doing. So I was like, if I could just give people some insight into what I'm doing here, who knows, maybe it will like correlate to someone starting their journey. But I didn't think at that time, because online coaching wasn't really a thing. I didn't know that I could help people online. I just thought I was helping people online by just posting. So I was like, you know, maybe this is, I didn't know what the goal of it would be because no one was doing this when I started. Like it was so new that I just was like, let's just post me doing this workout and maybe some people will see it. Like I didn't know what it would do. But then like my account started growing and I started reaching more people. And at that point in time, I was, oh God, this is a whole other story, but I'll make it really short. I was working like 3 jobs, going to school. One of the jobs that I was working at was this gym that Chad actually had worked at with me. And so this guy that ran the gym, he had made us like all these promises, right? He's like, you guys are going to run this gym and, you know, we're going to open one in California and you guys are going to run it. I'm going to move you guys out there. We were like probably 20 at that time. And so we didn't really like, we kind of bought into all of it and we were like, yeah, this sounds amazing.
You're like, okay, you're going to let a 20-year-old run a gym? Okay, okay.
Yeah. And so he had us, the best part of it is that it was all unpaid. So we were his quote, quote, interns that he was teaching the ropes, right? Because he knew we were going to school for it. He knew that like we wanted to be in the health space as like fitness professionals, but we needed like help from him. And so 6 months had gone by. We had not got a single paycheck. And we were like, I feel like we need to say something because like, I can't be working for free. I have all these other things. I'm going to school. And so we walked in and like basically demanded like a paycheck. We were like, hey, like we've been doing a lot here. We open up the gym at 5 a.m. We're here till like 7. Like I'm like skipping out on like other opportunities of pay. Yeah. And he basically just told us he couldn't pay us. Like, that's just what it was. This was an internship. Eventually he would like give us money and we were like, well, then we quit. Like, we were like, I guess we got to go then.
He's like, you want to be paid for services?
It's not how things work. Why? And so, that experience really taught me like what I valued in terms of just the way that I was treated in a workspace. And so, long story short, we had gone through like different mentorship programs and kind of like learning more about like how to make what we were doing online like a business. And it took a long time for things to kind of click and create systems. And I still didn't really know like what I was offering or how a check-in process would, like, it was just all so new because I also had zero friends doing this. This was like foreign. This was also when I lived in Connecticut. So I didn't have a fitness community like I do here in Austin. And so it was basically just a lot of like, hey, I guess maybe we could like talk about how we can help you, and then maybe we post something about it, and then we email them. Like I don't know, there was no like swipe up. There was no like click this link to apply. It was literally you posted a picture, and then maybe someone would like it. And then maybe you had an email in your bio and they would email you and inquire.
Or they DM you.
Or they would like DM you, yeah. And so that was kind of like the starting point of the business. Chad was also getting into like health coaching at that time. He owns like a business coaching company now, so he doesn't do the health stuff anymore. But because we were kind of doing it together in a way, we were just like figuring it out. Yeah. So once I had moved to Austin and Chad had moved to Austin, that's when we had met a bunch of people kind of in the fitness space that were also kind of doing what we were doing as like singular people, coaching some clients and, you know, making an impact and using social media. And this was almost 4 years ago now. But when I had moved here, I was like, things were really starting to pick up for me. And I'm like, I don't have the capacity to take any more clients on. Like, how can I basically have someone to help me? And that's when Sarah came in, because I was like, I think it's time for me to hire someone. And Sarah was one of the first people to apply. And I had only met Sarah one time prior. We had gone on a fitness cruise together.
Yeah,
maybe
she mentioned
that.
And so when she applied, it was like an immediate like, holy shit, like if Sarah was my assistant coach, like that would be fucking amazing. Sorry, I'm swearing.
No, you're good.
And I had an interview with her, and this was before we were like best friends. So it was just really an interview. Like I was just like, I know we know each other and we're friends, but like, I feel like you'd be really good for this position. And this April will be Sarah's 3-year in STT, which is really cool. But long story short, yeah, I think like the expansion process just came from me knowing that I had like a larger impact that I could make. That would, if it was just me, the impact wouldn't be as large.
Exactly.
So that's where I was like, I know I need to outsource. I know I need to find the right people. And honestly, like the coaches that are on the team, some have been here for almost 3 years, some coming up on 2 years. Like they've been here a while. And I feel like that kind of speaks for itself. Like they're very behind the mission of what we do. Everyone is a family. We all show up for each other. And I feel like the bond that we've been able to create is what makes the client experience that much more special too, because they see that, like they see how much we work together to create something really special for them. So yeah, long story short, it's been a long time since like those like wheels started turning, but I'm like, yeah, it definitely wasn't just like a, hey, let's start this business. Great success. Like, no, it was like a long time of just like working other jobs, like seeing if this was the right move. And then also having to trust other people to bring in to also make the vision come to life. Because when it's not you anymore, other people are also representing you.
Yeah.
So if it's not a good fit, it's not going to get you and the business to where you want to go either. So I feel like finding the right people was like something that I'm just like forever grateful for, like every single day.
Yeah. Was that intimidating at first to get help, like to have people on your team?
I feel like when you hire someone, it's like you have to teach them like your philosophies. And I feel like when I hired Sarah, a lot of her philosophies were very similar to mine. So it was like a really seamless transition, being able to, you know, have Sarah and be like, hey, this is the way that I think things should work. And she was very much like, I totally agree. And so all of the systems that are in place now, I feel like have come to fruition because everyone was just very much in alignment with different coaching styles. A lot of the coaches on staff in STT had been coaches prior as well. So they've brought in some of their own philosophies. But I think at baseline, like basically creating a system to where everyone feels like everything's organized, the client experience is like top notch, you know, they're getting great services, and the communication that we all have together, it kind of just allows like 6 people to, you know, give ideas and bounce ideas off of versus just 1 or 2. But yeah, I feel like honestly, it was just all very seamless in transitioning everyone for sure.
Yeah, because having people on your team have to be a reflection of you, and they are a reflection of you. So if y'all's values don't align, then it doesn't make sense. Like I've experienced this with like working with other companies, and it's really difficult to find. It's kind of similar. It's like, okay, these are my set of values. These are things that I find really important. So I want anything that's, you know, attached to me to be the same. So I'm curious, like, what is y'all's philosophy around your business? Like, what are the key values that are really important that all of you guys hold?
Yeah. I feel like a few ones that stand out to me in terms of like staff specifically is like everyone's voice is heard. That's something that we try and go over, like the core values, like every few months, just so everyone's very much on the same page. But everyone's voice is heard is like, you can come to anyone on staff and like they're going to support you if you have an opinion, if you have an idea. Communication obviously is a huge one for us too, because I'm someone who, like, if I don't know what you're feeling, how can I support you? So communication is huge. Trust is another really big one, just because it's like, I feel when you're working for someone else, you want to also believe that that person like believes in you and can support you, but vice versa, right? Like everyone's working as like a unit. So I feel like those three are like the biggest ones for me. But even just in terms of like what we preach to women, and we always say this, is like strive to thrive is really like the place where you'll come to find like what that middle ground on your health and fitness journey really looks like, getting away from like the very black or white approach, finding that health and fitness is something that, again, should add value to your life, and for you to finally feel like you've reached that sense of freedom through health and fitness. Because I feel like with a lot of women that come into the community, we always say like, we want this to be like your final destination. Like we want you to come here and be like, oh, like this is what I've been looking for. Like, this is what I've been missing out on. So I feel like it's the place where you'll find freedom through health and fitness, but also just create a lifestyle out of it. And finally feel like you're not just turning your wheels and trying this thing and trying that thing, but just understanding like, hey, if you really want to create sustainable long-term habits, like this is how you're going to do it.
Yeah. And it's like almost a really good thing and encouraged for when people work with you, if they don't need to work with anybody afterwards, it kind of just like makes sense.
Yeah.
Versus like you'll see people that like jump from coach to coach to coach to coach, either because of the coach and the client are not, they're just not vibing well, because you kind of have to find somebody that works with you, or they're only teaching them so much to where they still feel like they need to go elsewhere and they can't live on their own. It's like, I need you to hold my hand for the rest of my life. When it's like, realistically, it's like you said, I'm not gonna be tracking macros my whole life. It's like, if you work with the coach and you're like, oh my God, if I don't work with them, like, I don't know what to do.
Exactly.
Eventually you're going to have to learn how to just like live.
Fly your wings and leave the nest.
Yes.
It's funny. I was talking with Sarah this morning too, but she's had some clients on her roster for almost 3 years. Like when she comes up on her 3-year anniversary in April, she'll still have some clients that she started with back 3 years ago. And honestly, those clients, they don't need Sarah anymore.
They probably just want to be there.
They just genuinely love being in the community and getting the support from her. And I know what that feels like. Like you have all the tools, you know that you could do this on your own, but they're like, I don't want to leave the group chats. I want to check in with Sarah or like any coach on staff. Like we've had so many clients that have worked, other coaches almost 2 years now, and they genuinely love their coach so much and the relationship they've built with them that they're like, I don't want to leave Kelsey or Sarah or Colleen or like any coach that they work with. They're just so bought in because they're like, this is my family now. Yeah. So anytime a client that is like an OG client leaves the nest, we're all like, what do you mean? Like, you don't want to stay one more year?
You don't want to be with us forever?
I think it's such like a compliment to you and your whole team that they're here because of you guys. They're not here because of what you're telling them to do anymore. Like they've already learned what they need to learn, and now they just like the atmosphere.
Yeah, the atmosphere. I'm just like, it just, I feel like it speaks for itself because I've had coaching experiences that weren't the greatest in the past. And that's also like, even prior to creating STT, it kind of made me realize things that I would want to integrate into my own business and not. And like, okay, how can this system be a little bit better? Because I felt like that was really lacking for me and I wouldn't want it to lack for a client. So like, what can we bring in to make this transition smooth and seamless and easy for the client? Because also clients don't want to feel like they're doing like a billion things every week to check in. Like we want it to be bam, bam, bam. Here's the support. Here's the game plan. Let's go. Yes. And so, I just feel like the clients that are OG clients really aren't here anymore for the protocols or all of that, because they can do it on their own, but they're just, I just want to be here because I like you guys.
Because sometimes too, like,
and they make friends.
Exactly. In the fitness industry, it's like you said, when you lived in Connecticut, you didn't feel like you had that space or that group of friends to relate to.
Yeah.
And then now in Austin you do. And that could be that for them, is that they're like, okay, this is the only place that I have where I can relate to other people's, because maybe like people's relate to other people, because they might not have it wherever they are. So honestly, it's like in community, there's unity, you know, and it's like, we all need that in some space. Like I have 3 now Facebook groups. We have the podcast Facebook group. I have my binge eating support group. I have my Buff Babe Academy, which is my coaching, and like the people, they all interact with each other, and I barely really do anything because they're friends,
best friends. Yeah. No, literally, I think it was Sarah. I think 2 of her clients became roommates.
Oh my God.
I'm like, is that just like insane? Like, I'm like, you guys had no idea you existed, and now you're roommates.
Yeah, and you guys were the ones that connected them.
So
like it goes
crazy.
back to what you've created.
Yes.
Isn't that wild?
And actually this time last year, March of last year, we hosted the first ever STT live event.
Yeah.
I think there was like 70 clients that flew to Austin, Texas for like a 3-day event. And a lot of those girls that formed friendships through that event, like still stay in contact, whether they're in the community or not. And it was like a surreal experience just seeing like, some of these people have never met in real life, and we're all just together for that weekend, and everyone's just best friends. The vibes are amazing. Everyone's getting along, and it's like you've known each other your whole life, but you're just literally all because of like a community, like you're just talking through the group chats, and you see each other's posts and stuff on Instagram, and then you come in real life, and you're like, how have I not known you since I was 15?
That's crazy.
They already feel like they have really known each other, even though it's like I only online know you.
Yeah.
But then meeting them in person, it's so crazy. I have 2 friends, and they met through one of our wellness workshops, and they're still like best friends, and they hang out here in Austin, and it's just crazy how like that can happen, because you never know when you're going to find like that person.
And that person could have been so lonely when they first started their journey, and being lonely on your journey is a huge reason why a lot of people don't start. Because they're like, well, I don't have anyone to go to the gym with, or I've never done this before, and like none of my friends get it. So they just think, well, if no one gets it, why should I even try? Yeah. But if they find community, it's like you could just get into one of the group chats and everyone's like, oh, I could use some accountability with my water today. And then everyone starts sending pictures of their water. And it's like, that's so freaking cool that you guys just come together to help one another, and you didn't even know the person existed before you were here. Yeah. But now you're all like cheering each other on, which is like so awesome.
Yeah, it's so
This
cool.
is what social media should be. Yes. Like this is, I think, the purpose in which social media was made is to connect people from all walks of life that probably wouldn't have normally met each other. Yep. So I am super curious, because we kind of talked about it a little bit before, how when maybe you didn't know it, but like your outside circumstances were kind of affecting how you were showing up in your fitness journey, and you really didn't know. How do you think social media affects how people view fitness today?
I think like there's good and bad, right? Like in anything, but I think the good part of social media shows people like it's encouraging more people to move their bodies in some way. You don't need to train like me. Or you, right? Like you can find something that works for you that you enjoy, whether that's yoga or Pilates, like whatever it is. If you're moving your body, like I see that as a win. So I think social media encourages more people to move. If you're following people in the fitness space, right? You see like, oh man, like that's so motivating. Like, or you'll see a woman lifting weights, and maybe in your perception or what you've been taught, you've been taught that women should not lift weights, or you're going to look bulky, you're going to look manly, whatever it is. So I think that we are changing the perception for a lot of young women to start lifting more and moving more. And I mean, I can go into a whole other conversation about my relationship with alcohol and stuff like that, but that's taken a huge shift too, just through health and fitness and learning what my boundaries look like and my routines and my habits and how I show up for myself, and not really wanting to incorporate that very much into my lifestyle. So I feel like when I've shared pieces of my journey, whether that be my eating disorder or my relationship with alcohol and how that's changed over the years, people relate to that because in some capacity, someone's struggled with that too. Yeah. So even when I made a post about how I've shifted my relationship with alcohol and how it's something that isn't really big in my life anymore, there were so many people who have been like, oh my gosh, like, I'm so glad you spoke about this. Like, I'm going through a similar transition now. And I find that the posts that I post that get the most engagement or love or support are the ones where I'm being really raw and real about things that not a lot of people talk about, because it's either like, oh, it's embarrassing, or like, I don't want people to judge me, but I'm like, I'm not the only one that's dealt with this. So I think from a good purpose, like social media brings a lot of like motivation and like, relatableness to things that maybe someone else is struggling with. Whereas the bad side could be someone thinking that they need to carbon copy someone else's life.
I've done that so many times.
Yeah.
I think we all have. Yeah.
When I first started, I literally would just copy whoever I was watching.
Right. Oh, so-and-so's doing this. Might as well go do that too.
I was like, oh, she's a vegan and she's lifting. Okay, I'm going to be a vegan who lifts. Oh, okay, she's doing like Pilates, but she's pescatarian. I literally would do that because I thought that like I had to choose a lane, and that's the lane that I had to be in. Yes. And it's so wild.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I ended up so far away from all of those. I'm like a bodybuilder who eats a lot of food. Yes. It's like, wait.
I think too, it's like, I'm a firm believer that you need to know who you are outside of social media.
Yeah.
When you think about it, like this little box that we have with these little apps,
it's not real.
Literally is not real. Like we're just posting and connecting and sharing. But who are you when the app is off, or who are you when you're not looking at your phone? So I think the bad that social media can bring to someone into someone's life is like that very much comparison mentality, having to copy or, do things because someone else is doing it. So be careful and draw like a boundary, whatever that boundary looks like for you, to like, okay, this is great that this person's doing this or eating this, but like, I don't need to do the exact same thing. Because I used to think too, like I would see full days of eating.
Yeah.
Which I understand that they serve their purpose in some capacity. Like, oh, I just got inspired because I saw that so-and-so made this really good rice dish and I'm going to try it for dinner. Great. If you're using it for that purpose, awesome. But if you're using it for the purpose of, well, this girl, Michelle, is eating all these things, so I'm just going to eat all these things and I'm going to copy her macros and
then I'll look just like her.
And I'm going to look just like her. And it's like, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
So I think being a smart consumer when it comes to social media, just like you would in anything in life, being a smart consumer, and also like filling your feed with things that genuinely actually make you happy. Because if you're following people that are making you feel uncomfortable or bad about yourself, I'm like, you don't need to follow those people.
I audit my following list like all the time.
Yeah. I'm like, what's this person doing in my feed? I'm like, how'd they even get here? But yeah, so I think there's good and bad to everything, but you get to decide at the end of the day how you utilize social media, what you choose to absorb, and how you want to process that information. Because that's another thing too, is like, we see so much every single day. It's like little like dopamine hits, like this post, oh, TikTok, Instagram, this, and you're just bouncing around from a million different things. And I'm like, are you using social media for good, or are you just using it to pass time?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I just feel like we need to be smarter about what we're choosing to consume, how we're spending our time. I've like tried to spend less time on social media and more time maybe listening to a podcast or finding a new book to read or something like that. Things that are going to actually like educate me and also make me feel good. Because sometimes we see things on social media that don't make us feel good. Then their morning is fucked because you see something and you're, oh, now I'm all pissed, or like now I just saw this and I feel bad. Like, so I just think, like drawing the line between the good and the bad, but understanding like you get to choose how you use it ultimately.
I think it's about intent more than anything. And same like on our side being like, what's the intention behind us posting? Are we just posting to shit post, or are we posting because we want to reach a certain audience or talk about a certain topic or motivate or inspire or whatever it looks like for you?
Yeah. They want to have them feel a certain way whenever they get the post. And the one thing that you said that really stuck out to me is that you're so right. Like, we're catching all of these things without even really realizing it because it's just like, I'm just scrolling. Like, it's fine. But maybe like you go from Pinterest, you go from TikTok, you go to Instagram, you answer a text message, you go on YouTube.
You're
and
processing so many things.
Oh my God, it is so much versus like in the past, it's like, we didn't have, I'm thinking about like the 1800s. I'm like, shoot, there was not this many dopamine hits at one time.
They were like writing like poems to each other.
Which like one dopamine hit like every 6 months when the horse comes in with your letter.
Literally. Or like you see the sun for the first time in a few days. You're like, the simple times definitely make you realize how like silly a lot of what we let like stress us out and consume us is like, you do have to like draw a boundary at some point. Cause I'm like, we're not meant to be like robots. We can't just retain and receive all this information, like hit after hit after hit, and then go to bed at night and be like, so relaxed.
I'm good. Even though I have all of these different things in my brain.
Anxiety is through the roof.
No,
Bro,
really.
it's so, I mean, last night I was even struggling so much with anxiety. We were watching some sort of show, but like in my mind, it was going through all of the different things that I had experienced through that day.
Yes.
And I'm just sitting there and I'm like, and then also I'm very sensitive to like sound and too many things happening at one time because I feel like I might be ADHD.
I have ADHD.
I do too.
Yeah.
And I'm not even like joking. I'm like, I feel like I really need to get checked. But so I start like having like a panic attack because not only is there visuals that's going on the screen, but I'm also like, oh, okay. And then, you know, my videographer texted me and something was wrong with the YouTube video and then this and that.
Overstimulation.
And I'm sitting there and I'm like,
Literally,
I'm like, fucking help me. And I was like, Zach, please, can you pause the show real quick? Cause I'm having a panic attack.
Yeah. It's
too much.
like, we're just surrounded by so many things that can trigger us without us even knowing what our triggers are. And I'm like, it's because we're literally processing. Our brains are just like, boop, 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 like trying to like process what the hell is going on.
Yeah. And we don't even realize it because at the end of the day, like if someone gave us a list of all of the things that we did that day, saw that day, listened to that day unintentionally, even just walking in the grocery store and like, if you're like me and you hear someone having a conversation, you're like, ooh, I want to listen. You know, like you're picking up things from everywhere and you don't even know. And then at the end of the day, it's just like a big old blob of everyone else's shit. And you're like, what is mine?
Yep.
It's hard to pick out like what is mine and what is the world's. And social media can make it really hard, but it's our responsibility to use it in a way that's healthy for our brains.
Totally.
Sometimes.
Yes.
I'm curious on how you escape from all of that, because not only is it like for fun, like it is for some people to post or intake social media, it's also part of your job, and you are an online coach. Like you have to be on your phone or answering emails often, I assume. What do you do to kind of go back to self-care?
It's quite hard, I won't lie. I feel like it's really, really hard to like identify when am I clocked out. Because it's like, you know, we don't go into a 9 to 5 where, I mean, even I used to work in restaurants for like 7 years, and you'd go into your shift, you'd clock in, you'd do the work, and you'd clock out and you'd leave. And then you wouldn't think about work again until you go back. But for myself, for my fiance, we both run our own businesses, and it can be really hard to shut it off and be like, hey babe, this is like our time to relax, like just normal people. Like we're just human beings at the end of the day. Just because we run businesses doesn't make us any different from someone who doesn't run a business. Like we still have, like, we need to shut it off at some point, and it can be really hard. But something we try and hold ourselves accountable to is like 7 p.m. Like we're not,
we have a 8 p.m. one. so stupid.
Yeah. So I'm like 7 p.m. We're like not tapping back into WhatsApp, which is like how we communicate with all staff. I'm not looking at my emails. I'm not looking at any of the data tracking sheets or anything like that. So 7 p.m. is like usually like our, let's really hold each other accountable to like not tap back in. We'll like sit on the couch. Maybe we'll watch a show. We'll relax. We're planning a wedding right now in July, so we'll maybe look over some wedding stuff or whatever. And then on Saturdays, that's like our unplugged day.
Yeah.
So like I know a lot of people try and incorporate like an unplugged day, especially if you are someone that doesn't have like a Monday through Friday job. Usually, you know, you'd have like the weekends to just decompress. Saturdays are like our decompress day, and we don't look at any work messages. Like if anyone from work messages me, I likely won't get back to it till Sunday. Our coaches have this policy on staff as well for like clients. So clients also know that like, hey, coaches also get a day off and they get to relax on the weekends too. And then Sundays usually will be a lighter work day, but more of just like a setup for the week type of situation. So I think that's really helped us, because I think when Chad and I were both like heavily in like a big building phase, especially in like 2020, God, we were working like way too much.
Oh yeah.
And so I think we just at that point started setting these kind of boundaries for like unplugged Saturdays and work cutoff times that have kind of stayed pretty consistent. But you know, no one's perfect. We still have nights where like, fuck, it's 8:30. We haven't turned it off. Or if we're on a trip, you know, we kind of identify, hey, is this trip going to be a trip where we work a little bit, or is it going to be a trip where we like really unplug? We were in Cabo a couple weeks ago seeing like our wedding venue and stuff, and we like really prioritized that trip being dedicated to like the wedding and like time with each other and like Valentine's Day. Like we were like, we need to just decompress for a few days and like, we only get to do this once.
Yeah.
And so we really want to like, you know, take full advantage of just being fully present in that process. So I would say, yeah, like the unplugged Saturdays and the work cutoff time are two things that have helped. But again, it's never perfect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can relate to that so much.
I responded to an email at like 1 a.m. today. So I totally get it. I was like, oh my gosh, like doing like customer support type things where I was just like, it was bad.
If I got an email from someone at 1 a.m, be like, what are you doing?
Yeah,
but see, I immediately feel like I need to do it or I'll forget. So I'm just like, but I need to set structure like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the hard part about working for yourself is that like, you could do kind of whatever you want, whenever you want, but you can do whatever you want, whenever you want. Exactly. So you could stop working at 2. Yes. I could stop working after this if I wanted to, or I can work until 10 p.m. if I wanted to. So it can be unhealthy for both ways.
Things to do.
Oh, yeah.
And
there's always something to do.
I said that like last month. I was like, I think I need to stop finding things to do all the time with my free time because sometimes it's okay to have free time.
Yeah.
I'm like, I think it's easy to forget, like, especially as someone like myself who worked in food service and gyms and all the things, is that when I had free time outside of my other jobs, I'd be like, oh my gosh, I have a few hours free, like maybe go get a coffee, whatever. Now I'm like, oh shit, yes, I have 2 hours free. Let me start doing more work. And I'm like,
let me start a new business.
And so I'm like, obviously I think there's a time and place to be more dedicated to the quote, quote grind. But I also think it's okay to like, be like, hey, I also deserve to have a couple extra hours free if that's what my day correlates to. But yeah, I feel like with entrepreneurship, it's the hardest job I've ever had, the most rewarding job I've ever had, but the hardest because it's dependent on you and how you show up and what your routines look like and how you lead. And I'm like, damn, it is like way harder to be bad at like, you know, being an entrepreneur because of just the standard you hold yourself to.
Yeah.
Whereas like if I was bad when I was, you know, serving at the restaurants, I'd be like, oh shit, you know, I just had a rough day, but like I still get to clock in tomorrow. And there's other people
that like and can have your back.
Holding my weight. Yeah, exactly. Whereas, you know, in entrepreneurship, I just feel like, you really need to be on at all times. And that's the hardest part is that I've found that I've almost created a shell, like an outer layer for myself to protect me because I'm always in like, not hustle mode, but I told myself earlier this year, I really want to redefine what hustle means to me because hustle looked a lot different for me, especially when I was, you know, really heavily creating this business and stuff. And the hustle is still there, but I just feel like I don't want to feel like I have to be in that hustle mode all the time to be successful.
Yeah.
Because that also leads to burnout. And I've experienced that myself.
I'm in that right now.
Quite a few times.
We all get there.
I think everyone experiences it. But yeah, like no one talks about how people glorify entrepreneurship because of the freedom that it provides with schedule and, you know, what you can succeed at, et cetera. But no one talks about the fact that it's just as hard mentally and if not harder than really any job I've ever done in my whole life. Because it's something that it is kind of self-taught. Mm-hmm. You do learn from mentors and friends and stuff, but a lot of the things that you face day to day, you're just like, never had to figure that one out before.
Yeah, but fuck that up. All right.
I think that's the part that's like,
Don't do that
that's
again.
my favorite part is I'm like, okay, let's figure this out. Like I've never seen this before, done this before. Like let's.
Like a puzzle.
Yeah, exactly. And you like, it's trial and error, but it's definitely hard in being like your own boss. Your work does correlate to your income and it's hard to not be so hard on yourself about that.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, we have like slower seasons and that's okay.
Right. And the pressure, obviously like, providing others with income. That is something I never thought I would ever do. I'm like, when I was 18, I didn't think I'd be providing jobs for other people.
Yeah.
And so while that is a huge responsibility and something that I am like, holy crap, like it's kind of crazy. It's the most rewarding feeling also seeing a lot of my staff be able to get things that they love or, live their lives because of this job, in a way that really serves them. But it is also like a huge, responsibility because you're like, damn, it's not just me anymore. I have other people counting on me.
Yeah, there's like the whole, if I stop, then this person might not pay rent. Like this, it's a huge responsibility. Yes. I've been thinking about that a lot recently. I was like, I just feel so tired all the time because like I just keep going to the point where like yesterday I could have sworn like I had like a hernia or something. I was like crouched over in this like sharp pain, and I was trying to organize my pillows on my couch, and Zach's like, "You're fucking insane." He's like, "You're literally hunched over with the fucking hernia.
Like, lay down on the pillow, you psychopath."
Like, I got this. You have like a cane.
I was like, "I got this, bitches." I was like, "I'm gonna be a terror when I get older." But like, it's so true, because it's not about just you anymore. It's about like, you're taking care of your employees.
Which I think is a huge motivator in business is, and I see it with my fiance too. He manages like a 45 person staff.
That's so cool.
Which is wild. And I'm just like, and he he loves it, because it's such a reward for him to see the passion of his staff as well. And I definitely feel that with mine as well. I'm just like, damn, everyone is genuinely so excited about their role, which I think makes me more excited as a business owner, because I see the love that they have for the positions. And I'm just like, it's cool that I can provide that, but I'm like, it makes me want to show up and come up with new ideas and continue to push the business forward, because I'm like, not only do I love what I get to do as a leader and a boss and all the things, but I'm like, it's just so inspiring to see that other people are creating lives that they love through this company as well. Yeah. Which I when I was 18, I was like, I don't know what I want to do. And now like, it's just crazy to see the growth is wild.
That's awesome.
It's really it's inspiring for me to see how inspired they are to do the work that they do.
Yeah. And they can, even when maybe you're feeling like, oh crap, like I'm exhausted, like I'm tired, like seeing their drive and motivation, like, let's go, Caitlin. You're like, okay, let's go. Where are we going?
You like fuel each other.
Yeah, it's very true. And I feel like there's that ebb and flow when you work with people too. Well, wow, this was super insightful. I'm super excited to pick like one. Well, it's always difficult because I think about like what clip I'm going to be picking from this, and it's always very hard. But the last question that we ask all of our guests is, when was the moment that you knew how powerful you really were?
Ooh, that is a really good question. Oh my gosh, I'm trying to think if there's like, I mean, there's been so many turning points for me. I feel like when I first started hiring people in STT, and I kind of let go of this thought that I had to be powerful only by myself. That was a huge turning point for me, because my whole life I was led to believe like, you need to be strong, you need to do it for yourself, and you need to like, you know, show up for your, like, all of that is true. But I think when I kind of like realized that I could be more powerful with the help of others was a huge turning point for me, because it was also a huge test. Like I said, no one teaches you how to be a good boss. I feel like a lot of what I've learned when it comes to being a good leader and a good boss and having really healthy relationships with staff have come from previous experiences of myself being mistreated or going through really hard times in other workplaces and all of that. So I feel like my turning point for me and just really leaning into my power was leaning into the confidence that I know I can do this as a boss, and that like, it's okay to be scared. I think that's another thing too, is like being a leader is kind of scary. It's a lot of pressure and a lot of like, you know, this is kind of all on you, like do the work and be the best you can be. But leaning into the people that have believed in me since the very beginning, I feel like is what really allowed me to like unlock my true potential and my true power, because I had to let go of the thought of like, hey, it's okay to not be alone or like do this all by yourself. Like it's actually, you're actually going to do better, and you're actually going to be able to make a bigger impact if you accept that this is like the next level of growth. So I feel like, like just leaning into the power of like community and the people who I know were meant to be like in my life.
I love that. You like proved it to yourself too, that you could do it.
Yeah.
And now you're doing it successfully over and over and over.
You found power in asking for help.
For sure.
Truly. A lot of people need to learn sooner, for sure. Because like we do live in a society, like you said, where it's like, it's frowned upon. Like we need to be self-sufficient.
Like have your chest high. And
everything
like,
has to be
do it
done by
yourself.
me.
And it's like, no, you know, actually I think everyone would be a lot happier if they just leaned into support systems.
Definitely.
It teaches you a lot about yourself. And I've learned more about myself as a business owner, having staff and having community, more than I've ever learned prior by myself. There's been so many tests and lessons and things that I've implemented in, you know, different seasons that would have probably never come to me if I didn't take that path. And so I feel like I'm the most me I've ever been through a lot of these experiences with people and interactions. And, you know, it's just taught me a lot about how to lead, and be someone who can also be like in a support system for others through that too.
I love that.
Aw. Jinx, Kenny. Well, thank you so much for being on. This was truly incredible, and thank you for taking the time.
It was so fun.
I loved hearing your story. You're very inspiring of a woman, for
thank
sure.
you guys. Yeah, thank you for having me. This was so much fun.
Now, where can people find you?
You can find me at Caitlin Michelle Fit on Instagram. Strive to Thrive Community is like the business page. And then you can also find me on the STT podcast. STTEA.
We'll link it below also.
Like, you get the T.
Like you get the T on all things health. But hey, maybe you guys come on.
Yes,
I'd love
really
to.
Fun.
That would be fun.
But yeah, that's where you can find me.
Cool. And we'll have it all linked below too, guys. So don't you worry. You'll be able to find her. Well, that's going to be for it today, guys. I love you all so much. And you're more powerful than you think.
Bye.
Bye.